Hey, this is Max, and these are my top picks for Week 6, and we're doing it Pick'Em style. So we're going to use DraftKings Pick'Em format, and we're going to go through the tiers, and we're going to just check out who I like out of the players that DraftKings had tiered up, go over some Pick'Em strategy, and just get my top plays overall. The Pick'Em is only for the early slate, so keep that in mind. I'm not going to be evaluating any of the afternoon or Sunday night or Monday night games. First tier, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, and Julio Jones. My guess here, and my hope, is that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the highest end of the bunch. I think Michael Thomas will clearly be third and Julio Jones second. My opinion, though, is Julio Jones is probably actually far and away the best player in this tier, which might surprise some people who really like Hopkins, who's just been on a complete tear this season. And that Houston offense has been really clicking. Cleveland defense is really bad as well. However, Julio Jones, this is a guy who got injured in Week 4 and was someone who probably was hurt, banged up a little bit last year, and obviously has been banged up a bit this year. I know a lot of people think he's like class, but something to keep in mind, last year, and this is airyards.com, by the way, a site I really like. Last year, Julio Jones was arguably the best wide receiver in football. He had 1,400 receiving yards. His weighted opportunity rating is 0.7, very high. His ADOT of 14, very high ADOT with getting a racer of 0.77 racers receiving yards per air yard for an ADOT that high. It's pretty damn impressive. So by a lot of metrics, I think Julio was one of the best receivers in football last year. We have no Mohamed Sanu in this game, so that's 23 targets that are just going away, and Julio Jones is a talented enough wide receiver to basically just absorb those targets. And I don't think Justin Hardy and Nick Williams are really going to fill in very well here. So I actually like him the best, and I think I'm going to ignore ownership here, just really hope that Julio Jones is for some reason not higher end than Hopkins, and play Jones here. Tier 2, we also have another 3. Devonta Freeman, Stefon Diggs, and Brandon Cooks. Stefon Diggs might be injured here, so it's possible he doesn't play, so I think a lot of people will avoid him. I think Freeman is going to be far and away the highest down tier, and I actually do like Brandon Cooks. He has not had a great season so far this year. He only had that one amazing game against Houston where he had 35 fantasy points. All the other ones have been duds, and I think there's actually a reason for that. If you actually look at Cooks this season, his ADOT's really high. It's a 17 ADOT. Very, very high for a receiver. His air yards and receiving yards are actually pretty good. Obviously, he got a lot of those in that one game. His racer is very good for his ADOT. Now, I think a guy who has this high of an ADOT is going to be a really high variance player. So he's going to be a guy who's going to have duds like this. But I think his true skill, especially with Tom Brady throwing him, by the way, is going to be closer to this 35 that we see here and not like this 6 that we're seeing. And even in these games, by the way, where, he only had 3 receptions. Carolina, he almost had a touchdown. He definitely is getting, and these are some tough matchups as well. I guess, actually they're not really tough matchups. Who am I kidding? However, I think he's going to be a high variance play. He's a guy who can get a big touchdown. And I think what we're going to see in this tier is Devonta Freeman. By the way, I think Devonta Freeman is projected way more highly than Brandon Cooks. But Freeman might get upwards of 80% ownership, which means Cooks can be a really, really good play on this tier. Tier 3 we're going to skip, as if you remember, if you've watched my other top picks videos doing this format, we want to pick quarterback last because we want to see how our lineup actually ends up stacking up before we actually go that route. So we're going to move on to Tier 4. We have Chris Hogan, Rob Gronkowski, Devontae Adams, Jarvis Landry, Adam Thielen, Golden Tate. There's a lot of guys here who I'm not really sure how people are going to go. I don't see a clear ownership here that someone's going to get higher ownership. The guys I do like the best are probably the guys in this bottom 3. Adam Thielen, if Stefon Diggs is out, it's a very good wide receiver. I think he'll take up a lot of target share in that offense if Thielen is out. And by the way, another website that I like, predictivefootball.com, has something called expected fantasy points. So expected fantasy points is essentially how many fantasy points neutral for skill. So we're not taking skill into consideration. So it might overrate bad wide receivers and underrate good wide receivers. However, it does basically take into account, okay, where was someone targeted? Where were they targeted on the field? Takes into account red zone targets. And it's a really cool stat. I look at it every week. And one thing to consider is most people would say Stefon Diggs, oh, he's way better than Adam Thielen. Well, that has been true on the season. Diggs has 85 receiving fantasy points and Thielen has 68. However, Thielen, 64 expected receiving fantasy points this season, Diggs 60. Now, Diggs might be the more talented receiver. I'm not sure by how much. But Thielen actually is pretty underrated, I think, by a lot of metrics. And clearly he actually might even be, you could make an argument that he's close or even better than Diggs. Probably not that he's better, but you could make an argument that he's very close. So I think he's a very good play in this tier. Jarvis Landry, I think this game script is great. He's another guy who has great injury impact here. And Atlanta is kind of vulnerable in middle of the field, vulnerable against short passes. If Devontae Parker is out, I like Landry quite a bit. Golden Tate also is someone who flies under the radar. New Orleans offense is very, very poor. Tate is a guy who last year had some really good games and had some good games to start the season, has been quiet as of late. I think this is a good opportunity for him to have a great breakout game. I am going to go with Tate here because of ownership considerations, but I could go with either one of those guys. Tier 5, we have Will Fuller, Danny Amendola, Lamar Miller, Pierre Garçon, Randall Cobb, and Terrelle Pryor. My guess is Lamar Miller has the highest ownership here. If he doesn't, that is just absurd. And he's far and away my favorite play in this tier, so I'm just going to go with him. Houston is expected to score, and let's just go on Daily Fantasy Winners real quick so I can show you our sportsbook projection tool, which you can see for free, and we'll just wait for that to load a little bit. But Lamar Miller is playing for Houston, who, according to our sportsbook projections, has the highest run point share out of any team this week at 14. Now, Deshaun Watson is going to run some, so that this is a little skewed because of their quarterback running. Also, Donta Foreman is going to do a lot of work. Still, I think there's plenty of fantasy points to go in this running game, and Lamar Miller definitely is the highest projected guy in this tier. So I'm just going to go safely with him. I think a sneaky play could be Terrelle Pryor. San Francisco has been weak against wide receivers. Will Fuller is probably the worst player in this tier. I think that it would be just ridiculous to use him. Danny Amendola probably would have way lower ownership than Fuller, so I probably prefer him over Fuller. But Fuller is way below Garçon, Cobb, and Pryor here. So go with one of these guys, Miller, if you just don't really want to care about ownership. Tier 6, Chris Thompson, he talented player, has some injury impact with Rob Kelly. Carlos Hyde, some get a little less snaps last week, a little worried there. Jordan Howard has been good. Baltimore's run defense is at least okay, although they've been giving up a lot of running points. Javoris Allen, also some injury impact there with Terrence West out. Jay Ajayi has been terrible this season, yet is he in for a breakout game? We'll talk about this later. And Aaron Jones, who had a breakout game last week, but probably seems a little misplaced in this tier, maybe the worst player in this tier, depending on what your thoughts, depending if Ty Montgomery plays. I think the best player in this tier is Jay Ajayi. Now, Ajayi obviously has not done very well. He is a very talented running back. Atlanta has been weak against running backs and running backs pass catching. Now, Ajayi's not a great pass catcher, and we could see a game where someone like Damian Williams gets like 5 receptions and we're very frustrated. And by the way, Miami's 13-point underdogs. If somehow the game script goes differently and Ajayi is really talented, I could see him having a really big game, whereas the rest of these guys I think are higher floor, lower ceiling guys. So I'm just going to go with Ajayi here, and I do think he's actually the highest projected out of the bunch. I would think Javoris Allen here is probably the chalk out of this group. I think Carlos Hyde, very talented running back. He did lose some playing time last week, but if I have a talented player who my only concern is playing time, I'd rather play him because the chance that he could get an increase in playing time is way greater than the chance that like someone like Matthew Breida somehow just keeps getting snaps. So I think Hyde is a kind of cool ownership play here, and Washington is a little weak against the run. I'm going to go with Ajayi, though. This is sort of the let's have some weird backup running back things here and some wide receivers. Duke Johnson, he's been running very hot. Alvin Kamara, now that Adrian Peterson's gone, seems like a great option, just normal salary DFS. Great option here. He probably is the highest projected guy out of this bunch, and it's possible we could just use him here and call it a day. Other considerations, I think, are Marvin Jones. Again, he's a guy I like a lot. He actually is the number one wide receiver on the team technically, due to the fact that he plays the most snaps, although I think Tate is more talented. James White's an option. Kamara is definitely the chalk. I think what I'm going to do here is go with Jones and probably go with Stafford in tier 3, but I do think Kamara is the best of the bunch. Last year, we have Jermaine Kearse, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Abdullah, Mike Wallace, Gabriel Stills, Latavius Murray, Willie Snead. My guess is probably Abdullah will be the most owned. I think we'll get Austin Seferian-Jenkins getting high ownership too. I would say I think he's a decent fade this week. I think people are overvaluing him a little bit because of the cake matchups. New England is a good tight end matchup, but I could also see him putting up absolutely nothing. Taylor Gabriel's an interesting play as well. Mike Wallace is an interesting play. I think I'm just going to go with Abdullah here and just hope that people are kind of stupid. And then, obviously, if I'm doing all this, the clear QB play is let's do Matt Stafford, stack all these guys up, and hope for the best and hope that he throws for a ton of touchdowns. In terms of just quarterbacks in general this year, Deshaun Watson, I think, everyone really, really likes him this week. Obviously, he's been killing it. 30-plus fantasy points in the last 2 games. Concerns are Houston's offensive line is not great. So there could be some regression due there. Watson also is a rookie who has just a 2-game sample of good games. In the Kansas City one, it was a lot of garbage time. I could see him having a bad game. So he's someone that I'm not going to be on in normal salary cap. And I think in this, you could basically use any other quarterback and you're going to make a good ownership play. But yes, I'm going to go Stafford, which this actually works great because the thing is, his Stafford out of this group is going to be really low on. So I get to stack him with 3 of his players, completely game stack. I think this Pick'Em lineup, this is going to be the winning Pick'Em lineup, guys, I'm telling you. Great ownership plays, great stacking, and it all ends up working out. So not a bad situation here. So those are my top picks for this week via the Pick'Em. Obviously, there's other picks I like. Just to add another couple of guys that I like, Le'Veon Bell for salary cap. It's very high priced. I really feel like the line that Vegas has for that Kansas City-Pittsburgh game is wrong. I think the over-under will be higher when it's all said and done. I think Pittsburgh, I will definitely take over 21 points or 20 points. I really like Le'Veon Bell, especially on FanDuel, where he's only $9K. And a couple other guys, also Antonio Brown as well, from the same vein. CJ Anderson is someone who I think that's a Sunday Night Football game. Maybe it's not, actually. It's Sunday Night Football, so he might not be available on the DraftKings main slate, but I do really like him. I think the Giants will be very unmotivated. The Broncos have a great offensive line for run blocking. CJ Anderson has been very good this year. Another running back that I like quite a bit. And also Mark Ingram isn't available, by the way. He's close to salary with our man Alvin Kamara here. I like Ingram a little better from a projection standpoint. I think he's a great play as well. So that's it for my top picks video. If you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to tweet me at MaxJSteinberg. You can also find us on the Daily Fantasy Winners forums. We're talking about top plays all week. And hope you do well this weekend. I hope I do well this weekend too. And again, thank you for watching. And also, last but not least, FantasyLabs. I love FantasyLabs. They have ownership models. The ownership model is very accurate. They have good projections. They have a trends tool that's very, very cool. I recommend checking them out. There's a link in the comments. You can try them out for 5 days for $15. So again, see you later. See you this weekend. Good luck.